So this is a video on how to clip trapunto batting away, and the most important thing is to clip as close as you can, as close as possible. And the way I do this is to keep one hand behind the quilt. I have one hand, my right hand, underneath the quilt, and I'm constantly feeling my scissors, the tip of my scissors. I don't ever want to clip through the quilt itself. And also I'm putting some pressure with my fingertips behind the scissors, so that way I know that I'm clipping right against that line of stitching. And so I clip what I clip fairly rough, which is fairly close to the line, and then I'll go back through and kind of use the pressure on the top blade of the scissor, and I'll use some pressure to kind of pull it down and clip even closer to get in and right on top of that line. It's so important to get as close to your line of stitching as possible. And like I said, it's okay if you clip through it occasionally and actually clip the line of stitching itself, just as long as you don't clip so much of it that it can't actually hold it together. So I'm going to let you see me clipping this pretty close to the camera, and I'm being very careful to keep the quilt flat. My hand is keeping the quilt flat. If it bends, if it creates a crease, then that's going to be something my scissors are going to grab a hold of and nick and put a slice through it, and that's absolutely what I don't want to have happen. I am using, this is a pair of blunt tipped Famore scissors, F-A-M-O-R-E. They are available in the Daystyle Designs quilt shop, and they're blunt tip, which makes them pass through the surface of the quilt very smoothly, and so it's not going to be catching or gouging the fabric, because that blunt tip will just slide right along it. When I have some tight areas and creases like corners, then I'll go back through with a pair of Fiskars sharp tip scissors and clip those points to make sure that they're nice and clipped out as well. But it doesn't matter how big your quilt is, it doesn't matter how complicated it is. The point of trapunto is to only leave the batting in those specific areas that you want puffy and not anywhere else. If this was jagged, if I had let this be jagged or way out here, when I went to quilt this, then the line would be indefinite. The puffiness would not have a definite difference between this area and this area. And then you're basically defeating the purpose of bothering to add the extra layer of batting and bothering to clip it away in the first place. You want to get credit for doing it, and in order to get credit for doing it, you've got to clip very carefully. You can see this line right here. This is pretty jagged, so now I'm going to go back through and I'm using my fingers behind the quilt to press that forward, so that way I can use the top edge of the blade to pull that down and clip it even closer to that line of stitching. Of course, you're going to have to reverse this if you're right-handed. I'm left-handed, but it's not that difficult, and in fact this is actually one of my favorite parts of working on a quilt, is clipping the trapunto away, because this is really easy work that you can set and watch movies and just kind of listen to something enjoyable while you clip batting. And it does take a lot of time, but at the same time it's not complicated. It's not as complex or difficult, as meticulous as something like applique, hand applique. So that's how that works. And another thing that you want to keep in mind with trapunto is that also, in order to get credit for doing this, you have to use dent stitching. So after this gets basted again and I start quilting it, I'll outline all these motifs and then quilt fairly densely. If I was to leave this blank, which I could because the battings I use allow quilting up to 10 inches, but if I was to use that and only, let's say, let's only quilt the outline and leave this with no stitching inside of it, then it wouldn't look like I did anything special. So you have to do some form of stitching in your flatter areas, in your non-puffy areas, in order to get credit for doing it. So I hope that helps you understand how to do the first step of trapunto and encourages you to try it in your own quilts. It's a fun technique. It adds loads of texture and a gorgeous look to your quilts, and you really can't get it any other way.